What's going on, guys? This is Rob, and if you're enjoying the content that I'm uploading onto my channel, then feel free to subscribe, and you can also offer suggestions on topics and characters and storylines and whatnot that we can have discussions on later on in this channel. Okay, so getting into Superman Multiplicity, if you guys remember my video on Multiversity, I told you that that story was really essential to understanding everything that's going on in Multiplicity right now. So again, if you guys are new here to my channel, if you guys haven't seen Multiversity, I would highly suggest that you watch that video in order to understand what's going on here. Now, of course, I'll make this make sense. I won't just be like, and then this happens. Like, I'll make it make sense as best I can, but I think that watching the Multiversity video will help to flesh things out a bit. So you'll find that Multiversity video down in the description of this one. But this is really kind of cool because this is Tomasi basically setting up building blocks. And a lot of people didn't really seem to grasp that when the story was first written. And the reason why is because up until this point, Tomasi's really just kind of built, like, basically written a series of self-contained stories. Like, up until this point, you can grab Action Comics, you can grab Superman Rebirth, whatever you want to do, and you can read a story arc, and that's all you need. It's totally self-contained. And it works because it's like a throwback to the old 1950s, 1960s Superman comics, where every single comic was basically a one-shot. With regards to what he's doing here, these are building blocks. And so when the story first came out and the story first wrapped up, a lot of people kind of felt like it was rushed, and it is to a degree. I mean, it is a little bit rushed, but it's designed to set the stage for Superman Reborn. Now, the cool thing about this is that, again, within Hamilton County, you know, basically within Smallville, we basically pick up with Superman dressed as Clark Kent, kind of on his way, doing whatever it is that he's doing, when he suddenly comes across Superman from the Superman Red Sun universe. And that was one of the other reasons why I wanted to do Superman Red Sun, so you guys would know this stuff. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through and I'm going to go ahead and put the playlist for Superman Rebirth down in the description, and that'll have a lot of the Superman stuff that I've done so far. So like everything from Superman Rebirth so far, Superman Red Sun, it'll also have Multiversity, so that way you guys can kind of understand everything that's going on up to this point right now with regards to Superman Rebirth going into Superman Reborn. But the cool thing about this is, remember, we don't really know how Red Sun Superman got here. He's just here all of a sudden. Now, this is one of the things that Tomasi's going to do over the course of the story, is that things are just going to happen, and we're not really going to be given an explanation as to why they're happening or how they're happening. Again, this is really just kind of a story of convenience, and we're kind of left to take it with a grain of salt in terms of why these different things have gone on and so on and so forth. But again, because this is Superman, you know, Tomasi plays it fast and loose in the sense that Superman just speaks multiple languages. It's just one of his things. It's one of the ways that he basically is able to navigate these uncharted waters of other countries and just kind of go in and communicate with other people. It's how he's able to function in the world, because truth be told, it would make for a pretty mundane Superman story if, like, Superman showed up in Russia and he was trying to help people in a major crisis and couldn't speak Russian. Like, it'd be kind of funny to see like a translator for Superman. But the fact remains that, again, you know, he basically starts talking with Red Sun Superman, and then they're basically set upon by a group of gatherers. Now, again, this is where things get a little murky here, because we don't really know why the gatherers are here. We simply just know that they're there. But the actions of these gatherers seem to have basically been tracking down this Red Sun Superman. And of course, when they come across both of these Supermen, these gatherers don't stand a chance. I mean, they do what they can to face off. They do what they can to try to capture Red Sun Superman. But in the end, the main DC Superman that we know is basically like, hey, look, do you have heat vision? And Red Sun Superman's like, yes, I have all the same powers that you have. That's all they need. They literally just take out every last one of these gatherers. Now, from here, the group is met with the arrival of the Multiversal Justice League. Now, this is getting into Grant Morrison's Multiversity. Remember, after Multiversity, Grant Morrison basically established that all the members that you see here, Aquawoman and, you know, basically President Superman is who this guy is, they were all brought together by Harbinger, which is this reimagining of that girl, Layla Michaels, I think it was, or Lila Michaels from Crisis on Infinite Earths. It was a more updated reimagining of her character, but she basically served the purpose of grabbing all these different superheroes from the multiverse, bringing them together to face off against a group called the Gentry that were attacking the multiverse. That was really the whole basis behind the Multiversity story. But following that story's conclusion, this Multiversal Justice League basically took up the mantle to do exactly what it is that they seem to do. They basically operate as protectors of the multiverse. That is to say, they only ever really step in when the multiverse is in jeopardy. They face against that threat, and then they back off. So they basically play the exact same role that the Monitors did when Grant Morrison introduced them as part of really, you know, the post-Infinite Crisis going into the Final Crisis story. That instead of getting involved in each individual Earth's affairs, instead, they basically sit back and observe, and they never go into action unless some being comes along that threatens the entirety of the multiverse. And that's exactly what's happening here. Superman is basically told by, you know, these different superheroes as part of the Multiversal Justice League that there is a being that's traveling around capturing Supermen from across the multiverse and then siphoning off their power. Now, no one knows why, but that's what this person's doing. And so what we do is we basically pick up with Kong Kenan. And it's kind of funny because during the new Superman story, which I haven't even uploaded that yet, but I already know that people are going to start giving me a hard time. During that new Superman story, I kept calling him Kenan Kong. And I was sitting here thinking about that, and I was like, no, it's Kong Keenan. Like, why did I keep calling him Keenan Kong? I think it was just for some reason just kind of ingrained in my head. But the fact remains here that, like all the other Supermen, he's basically set upon and he's captured by these gatherers. And this is when we learned what it is that they do, that they basically, imbue these various Supermen in this kind of black goo, and then they're effectively teleported to a different location. Now, where this location is, we don't quite find out yet. Instead, we basically join with regards to, the Multiversal Justice League and the normal Superman when they arrive to try to save Kong Keenan. But once they get there, it's already too late. These gatherers essentially grab him and whisk him off. And this is when we find out what happens, that they're basically taken to this huge storage complex is the best way to describe it. And one of the Supermen that's being taken out, of course, is Captain Carrot, the Rabbit Superman. Captain Carrot! I love Captain Carrot! I really want to do a story on Captain Carrot. The problem is that I feel like nobody would care, but I think I'm going to do that story just for me. I think I'm going to do that story just because I want to, and I don't even care if anybody watches it or not. Captain Carrot is amazing. But this is when we learn basically what's going on. The Captain Carrot being taken by whoever this being is, has his power siphoned off, and he's reverted back to a rabbit. He's reverted back to his most base form. Now, the caveat to this is that not every Superman, and in fact, Captain Carrot's really the only exception, but not every Superman is suddenly, reduced down to like an infant. Instead, they're reduced down to their normal form before they gain superpowers. And so what this means is that Captain Carrot basically is reduced down to a normal rabbit because having the powers of Superman are what made him look and appear and fight the way he did before. So, basically a rabbit is kind of like his normal form. It's kind of like his Clark Kent form if we were to make that comparison between the two. But in any event, moving on, we basically end up picking up on Earth 14. And this is when we join with the Justice League of Assassins. And this is really, really cool. Again, it gives us like a different depiction of the Justice League team as we knew them, but much like the other superheroes that we've seen so far, they're in the midst of an attack by the Gatherers. Now, the crazy thing about this is that they're able to fight off the Gatherers in their full force. And this Justice League team is ruthless. I mean, they're nothing to be joked about. But the problem is, with regards to this being that's suddenly showing up and whisking all these Superman away, this guy makes his presence known and annihilates the entirety of the Justice League of Assassins except for their version of Superman. And so what ends up happening is this version of Superman is basically taken prisoner. Now, as far as I'm aware, I don't think there is any explanation or any story or any origin on that Justice League of Assassins. I think what we see here is what we get. I think that that's really the extent of it. Now, I could be wrong here, but I believe that's the case. If I'm wrong, feel free to correct me. I mean, I'm sure you guys love correcting me anyway, but if I'm wrong, feel free to post a comment and let me know. But at this point, we basically pick up with the Orrery of Worlds and the House of Heroes. Now, remember, this was established in really in Grant Morrison's whole Final Crisis and Multiversity, that the House of Heroes is basically in the center of the multiverse. And it makes the most sense, right? I mean, if you're going to be a Justice League team that operates to ensure the multiverse's protection, it doesn't make any sense to exist like outside the multiverse. It makes sense to appear like in the middle of the multiverse, if for no other reason than the sense that it just makes good sense. I mean, to be honest, it's like the mayor living in the center of town. It wouldn't make any sense if City Hall was in the suburbs. Like that wouldn't make any sense. You'd want City Hall downtown. It's the same thing with the Orrery of Worlds. But this is where the Superman of DC Rebirth, this is where he's basically given an explanation of everything that's going on. And it's kind of funny because the question they have is, are you familiar with the multiverse? Well, of course he is. Like, I mean, why wouldn't he be? And these are the callbacks to Final Crisis. This is Tomasi going back to the Final Crisis story saying, hey, look, this Superman is well aware of everything that's going on. But the idea is to basically find a way to basically capture, to stop these members of the Gatherers from capturing the various Supermen. Well, the problem with this is if they don't know where it is the Gatherers are going, then the only option left to them is to race to every single world they can find, those worlds that haven't been attacked by the Gatherers, that haven't lost their Superman, and basically, beat the Gatherers to the punch. And that's what's basically happening here is the Harbinger, again, this Lila Michaels girl is basically saying, hey, look, here are the worlds that are being attacked by the Gatherers. And so this Multiversal Justice League responds in kind. It's basically them going to all these different locations. Now, the cool thing about what Tomasi does here is he doesn't take this to like 1960s Superman, right? Where like Superman shows up and everybody's like, oh yeah, you're Superman, I can trust you. No. What he basically does is he basically treats this Multiversal Justice League, he treats these different Supermen the way that anybody would see them, as being strangers. No one knows who they are. No one knows why they're here. They might as well be an invading force. And so when the DC Rebirth Superman alongside the Multiversal Justice League show up on these different Earths, Earth 13, show up on these different realities and say, hey, look, we're here to save you, they don't know if they can trust him or not. And they all basically end up engaging in a massive conflict. Now, of course, Superman always comes out on top, but again, it's the same thing in almost every single circumstance. You know, it's the same thing in Earth 10. It's the same thing in Earth 12, where it's basically Batman Beyond. It's the same thing in Earth 18 and Earth 16, but there are a couple of exceptions here and there, where once everything winds down and once everybody talks about what's happening, that they ultimately end up joining forces with the idea of creating a plan on what it is that they should do. Now, this is where I say Tomasi just kind of starts bouncing around, and the idea is that if the question is being asked, why is it that, you know, this being is capturing all these Supermen and what purpose does it serve? Then the other half of this is that if he's capturing all these Supermen, let's put a whole bunch of Supermen in one location. And this is where Superman says, hey, look, I have a plan. Our plan is to lose. Now, we don't learn the basis behind this. Instead, what happens is Tomasi sort of wraps around on the back end and ends up bringing us the plan that Superman had once we get around to the conclusion of the story. But something to keep in mind here is the basis behind the Ultima Thule. Remember, the Ultima Thule is a Final Crisis, Infinite Crisis invention, which was used by Nick Yuotan, one of the last of the monitors, to travel from one universe to the next, or I guess travel from one reality to the next. Because keep in mind, it's like this invisible wall, this barrier that separates universes. That's why you can't just walk from one universe to the next. There's this invisible barrier of sound. You literally have to attune yourself to the frequency of the other universe in order to access it. That's why the Flash is able to move from one universe to the next, because it's basically like, you know, attuning his body's atomic structure at such a speed that he can alter his frequency and just travel into another universe. It creates kind of a weird situation, but it's one of those things we just kind of have to accept in the realm of comic books. But what we end up finding out is that this plan of the DC Rebirth Superman is to get himself captured, is to have himself captured. And the reason why is because if these beings are being taken away, then the question is, where are they being taken to and what's happening to them? And so his idea is to basically operate as bait to allow himself to be captured by prophecy. And that's exactly what happens. Superman's captured, he's taken prisoner, but this is when Tomasi starts to mess around with this idea of the Watchmen, of Dr. Manhattan in DC Rebirth, when we basically have this scenario where the prophecy is looking at this Superman and says, you're an anomaly. You're not supposed to be here. You're not supposed to be in this universe. You're not part of the master list. Now, this is where we start getting into murky waters. And the reason why I say that is because of this. Remember, with the New 52, when DC first launched that, it was supposed to be a wholesale revamp, right? I mean, it was supposed to be everything is totally restarted. This Superman was supposed to have been gone. Convergence fixed that problem. Convergence brought this version of Superman back. I would surmise the notion here is that by traditional standards, this Superman should just simply not exist. He should have just simply ceased to exist. This master list of Supermen that prophecy has basically is composed of all the Supermen that exist within DC Comics as part of the New 52 multiverse. And so the question is, if this Superman is not supposed to be here, is he even part of the existing multiverse in DC Comics, or is he part of a multiverse from a previous line of before the New 52? Again, we're kind of getting into waters that are getting a little bit hairy here, so I don't want to confuse you guys too much, but the notion here is that basically this Superman's just not supposed to be part of this equation. This feeds into the whole thing that's been going on with DC Rebirth, where DC's been very cloak and dagger when you've had like Dr. Oz monitoring Superman saying, you're not supposed to be here. You're not supposed to be part of this equation. Kidnapping Tim Drake, leading everybody to believe that he died, so on and so forth. These are all part of the clues that are leading up to this great big huge introduction of the Watchmen to see who's behind DC Rebirth with the 10 missing years. But what ends up happening is you basically find out that with this Ultima Thule that was brought to this location, or this device that was brought to this location by Superman himself, that the vessel just kind of sits there, and again, it continues to hum this frequency, this sound that basically acts as a homing beacon. Now, this is where I say Tomasi's kind of messing around with things, because under normal circumstances, we would expect prophecy to have some measure of understanding about how all this works. I mean, what prophecy's basically been saying is the reason why he's going around capturing all these Supermen is because of the fact that his own planet is basically doomed, and in order to save his planet, he has to absorb all the powers of the Supermen from across the multiverse in order to have enough energy to face off against whatever this threat happens to be. Now, we don't know what this threat is, and it could be that later on down the line, this threat's revealed to be Dr. Manhattan. We have no earthly clue. All we know is that there's just some threat that's threatening the planet of prophecy, and the idea is to basically absorb all the powers of the Supermen, throw them into a pit, and turn them into some kind of a labor force. And that's really one of the more messed up things about this, is because once these Superman powers are absorbed, these, I guess, Superman and Superwomen's powers are absorbed, they're basically made to just kind of dig their own grave. That's really it. I mean, they're basically made to dig their own grave, they'll be killed off, they'll be buried, and then more Supermen will be brought in to do the exact same thing. It's really a screwed up situation. But this is where I say Tomasi's kind of doing whatever, and just kind of leaving us to just take things with a grain of salt, is because prophecy says, well, fine, you can have this music continue to play. With a villain of this caliber, a villain that's so dark and so sadistic, even if only for the sake of just living up to the trope of a villain like that, you'd think he would just destroy that device. So again, it's Tomasi just kind of giving himself an easy way out. But the idea here is that because this is basically a resonance device, because this is the Ultima Thule, which allows individuals to transition from one location to the next, and because of the fact that these Supermen were supposed to, I guess this multiversal Justice League was supposed to travel to this realm of prophecy and rescue all the Superman at the same time, that when they were essentially sent back to the House of Heroes by the DC Rebirth Superman, who in turn allowed himself to be captured, the question is, well, how do they access him? And this is when they learn that the Ultima Thule is still in existence, and the Ultima Thule is basically hovering out or sending out a frequency, a beacon of sorts. And so the idea is, how do they access it? Because remember, the Ultima Thule, that ship took 1,000 years to build. Well, they don't have 1,000 years. They have hours at best. And so because of this, they basically have to find a way to make a new Ultima Thule. Now, because of the fact that this version of the Flash from Earth 36, Red Racer, has a genius level intellect, again, Tomasi just plays it quick. He kind of invokes some tropes here. He sort of takes the easy way out and saying, well, Red Racer will basically use his Speed Force powers. He'll construct a new vessel extremely fast, but it comes at the expense of his own life force. And so he basically works all the energy out of his body. And so while a new Ultima Thule is created, the Red Racer of Earth 36 ends up dying in the process. Now, this would make for more of a dramatic sequence if there was more going on, but it's literally 3 or 4 panels of Red Racer working and then he's dead. And that's it. Not only that, we basically have, the DC Rebirth Superman holding Captain Carrot, which is one of the most adorable things I've ever seen, but he's talking with the other Supermen and Superwomen around here. And the question that they have is, how are you going to save us? How are we all going to end up, getting out of this? And what he says is basically, this device, this Ultima Thule, is designed for the purpose of operating as a beacon that is basically like a telephone, that we have a phone on this end. All we need is somebody to be able to receive on the other end. If they can build a new Ultima Thule, then it basically will give us an out. It'll give them a way to access our location. It'll give them a way to basically follow through into this, this new dimension, this new universe, whatever it happens to be, access it, and then turn around and free all of us. And so because of that, again, Red Racer basically sacrifices his life, basically working to death, expending all of his energies in the process, and in doing so, offers the opportunity for the Multiversal Justice League to use their Ultima Thule to show up and free all these Supermen. Now, again, if you guys are looking at this and you guys are kind of like, well, this is really, really rushed. Yes, it is. It's a very, very rushed story, but do not take this as an indication of everything Tomasi writes. Do not take this to mean that everything with regards to Superman Rebirth has been bad so far. This is by no means a bad story. It's just designed to set the stage for things that are coming. So what will probably happen is we'll probably see some callbacks. And in truth, if I really had to surmise, I would say that this story was probably designed for the purpose of just verifying that the Multiversal Justice League exists inside the whole DC Rebirth landscape. That Grant Morrison's Multiversity is still part of the official New 52 landscape. That's one of the things that a lot of people seem to get wrong. One of the things that they didn't grasp is that DC Comics, you have like Earth 1, you have like the Earth 1 line of stories, Superman Earth 1, Batman Earth 1. That's just a publishing brand. Earth 1 is an actual universe. Earth 0 is the New 52 universe. Earth 2 is the Justice Society of America universe. Earth 3 is Crime Syndicate, so on and so forth. That sequence of realities still exists, but it's one of those things that a lot of people get wrong all the time. And so with regards to the arrival of the Multiversal Justice League, things go super fast. They go really, really, really quick. They're basically able to face off against Prophecy. They're able to defeat Prophecy. It happens over the course of one page, and the day is saved. And that's really it. There really isn't some great big huge grandiose battle. It's not like there's a conflict that stretches on for pages and pages and pages and pages. It's a one-page conflict. Prophecy's defeated, and that's that. The other half of this is that Prophecy is basically whisked away. Where normally he would essentially be defeated or he would be killed, he's essentially just kind of whisked away to another location. Now, we don't really know where he's taken to, but we end up finding out that he's been taken by Dr. Oz, and he's one of a multitude of people who have essentially been locked away by Dr. Oz. Why this has happened, we don't know. But again, all this seems to lead directly into Superman Reborn and the idea of the Watchmen or Dr. Manhattan or whoever it is being behind DC Rebirth, this great Grand Poobah story that's coming later on down the line that I'm wildly excited for, but I have no idea what it is. I've never been excited for something that I know nothing about as much as I'm excited for this. Like, it is it's a really exciting thing, I think, that's coming up. But if you guys are new here to Comics Explained, make sure you hit the sub button, become part of the Rob Corps. If you guys enjoyed this video, make sure you drop a like. Also, I imagine that some of you may have a few questions here and there. You may be a little confused. If you are, post your questions down in the comment section, and either myself or somebody else will be able to answer those and get that sorted out. I'm calling on you guys of the Rob Corps. If there's a question down there that I haven't answered that somebody has, answer it. But make sure your answer's right, please. I've seen a few times where people have done that, and they basically reply with opinions instead of facts. Please make sure that you guys have the right answers in that. But anyway, we're gonna go ahead and bring this video to an end, and I will catch you all later. Peace.